My name is Emily. I'm 28 years old, and on December 24th, at 7:42 p.m., I handed my own father a 30-day eviction notice in front of his 19-year-old girlfriend, 3 family friends, and a Christmas tree worth more than my mother's entire jewelry collection. He didn't scream. He didn't cry. He just stared at the paper, then at me, then back at the paper like it was written in a language he couldn't understand. But he understood exactly what it meant. He just never thought I'd have the nerve to do it. Before I tell you exactly how I got to that moment, standing in the living room of the house my mother spent 22 years paying off, watching my father's face drain of color, I need to ask you something. Have you ever been told that you're too emotional to make a big decision, only to watch the person who said it make the worst decision of their life with a smile on their face? Drop a comment below. I read every single one. And if you're new here, consider subscribing. This channel is for anyone who's learned that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones you need to protect yourself from. My mother died 3 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 6 months from diagnosis to funeral. She was 54. I was 25. My father, Mark, was 56 at the time, and I want to be very clear about something. He was not a grieving widower who lost his way. He was a man who saw an opportunity the moment my mother's breathing slowed in that hospital bed. I just didn't know it yet. My parents had been married for 27 years. They met in college, built a life together, and by the time I was born, they had already purchased the house. It wasn't a mansion, but in Newport Beach, California, a 4-bedroom home with an ocean view and a pool in the backyard is worth more than most people will earn in a lifetime. My mother was a real estate agent. She knew exactly what that house was worth, and she made sure it was protected. 2 weeks before she died, she called me into her bedroom. The hospice nurse had just left. My father was out getting coffee, which I later found out meant sitting in his car on the phone with someone I now know was a 16-year-old girl from his gym. But I'll get to that in a moment. My mother handed me a manila envelope. Inside were 3 things: a copy of her will, a notarized letter, and a USB drive. She said, "Emily, I've done everything I can to protect you. But your father, he's not who I thought he was. If anything happens, everything you need is in here. Don't let him take what's yours." I remember thinking she was being dramatic. The pain medication made her say strange things sometimes. I kissed her forehead and told her I'd keep it safe. I put the envelope in a safety deposit box at a bank 20 minutes away and didn't think about it again until the day after her funeral. The will was read 4 days later. My mother had left the house, valued at $1.2 million, to me. Not to my father. Not to the estate. To me, Emily Carter, her only child. The letter inside the envelope was a handwritten note explaining why. It said, "Mark has been unfaithful for years. I have evidence. If he contests this will, the USB contains everything. Protect your home, Emily. It's the only thing I have left to give you." I was 25 years old, grieving my mother, and suddenly holding a grenade with the pin already pulled. For the first year, my father played the part of the heartbroken widower. He stayed in the house. I let him. He was my dad. I wasn't going to kick him out of the home he'd lived in for 2 decades. But I made one thing very clear: the house was in my name. The property taxes, the insurance, the maintenance, all of it was my responsibility now. He just had to live there and not destroy anything. Simple, right? Wrong. By month 14, things started to change. He repainted my mother's office, the room where she planned every family vacation and helped dozens of families find their own dream homes. He turned it into a gaming room. Then came the new car, a $78,000 BMW. He told me he'd saved up. I didn't believe him, but I didn't have proof. Then came the girlfriend. Her name was Tiffany. She was 19 years old. Let me repeat that. 19. My father was 59. She had bleached blonde hair, acrylic nails so long she couldn't open a soda can, and a voice that sounded like a cartoon character who'd inhaled helium. She moved into my mother's house 3 months after they started dating. My father didn't ask. He just told me. Tiffany's staying for a while. A while turned into a year. I started visiting more often. Not because I wanted to see them, God no, but because I needed to document everything. Every change to the house, every new piece of furniture, every strange car in the driveway. I took photos. I saved text messages. I backed up every email. And then, in early November, I got the notification that changed everything. A lien had been placed on the property. I opened the county records website and stared at the screen for a solid 3 minutes. My father had taken out a $400,000 home equity line of credit against my house, in my name. He'd forged my signature on at least 4 separate documents. And he'd used the money to buy Tiffany a car, take her on a trip to Bora Bora, and, I later discovered, pay for her breast augmentation. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat in my apartment, opened my laptop, and started building a case. Because if there's one thing my mother taught me, it's that you don't fight with emotions. You fight with paperwork. And I had every single piece of it. The next morning, I called my father. I didn't accuse him. I didn't mention the lien. I just said, "Dad, I'd like to come by for Christmas Eve dinner. Can we do that?" He sounded relieved, like he'd been waiting for me to finally accept Tiffany. He said, "Of course, sweetheart. We'd love to have you." He had no idea what I was bringing with me, but I'll get to that in a moment. First, let me tell you what I found on that USB drive my mother left me. Because when I finally plugged it in, 3 years after she died, I understood exactly why she looked at me that night and said, "Don't let him take what's yours." What I found were 47 voicemails, 88 text message screenshots, and a series of emails between my father and a woman named Gina, dated just 6 weeks after my mother's diagnosis. He wasn't just unfaithful. He was planning his exit. And the house, my house, was always part of the plan. If you've ever been betrayed by someone who was supposed to love you, drop her in the comments. You're not alone. We're building a community here of people who chose themselves. And if this story resonates with you, hit subscribe. More truth is coming. The USB drive sat in my laptop for 22 minutes before I finally clicked on the first file. It was labeled Gina_NOV 2019. My mother had been diagnosed in October of that year. By November, my father was already texting another woman. "Can't wait to see you again. This is getting complicated, but I'll figure it out." That was the first message. The second one, sent 6 days later, read, "Once this is over, we can finally be together. The house alone is worth over $1 million. Once this is over." My mother was still alive when he wrote that. She was in a hospital bed, losing weight by the day, and he was calculating the square footage of her death. I kept scrolling. There were 88 screenshots in total, spanning nearly 2 years before my mother even got sick. There were hotel receipts, dinner reservations for 2, and a series of emails where my father discussed liquidating assets with a financial advisor, all while my mother was undergoing chemotherapy. And then there were the voicemails, 47 of them. Some from Gina, some from other women I'd never heard of. But the one that made my stomach turn was from my father himself, left on my mother's phone while she was in surgery. "Hey, it's me. I know you're in there, but I need you to sign this document when you wake up. It's just a formality. Don't worry about it." She never signed it. And that document, it was a quitclaim deed. He was trying to get her to sign the house over to him while she was barely conscious. I sat there in my apartment, 28 years old, with a laptop full of evidence and a father who thought he'd gotten away with everything. But he didn't know about the lien yet. He didn't know that I had already contacted the county recorder's office, filed a fraud report, and hired a forensic document examiner. And he certainly didn't know that I had a plan for Christmas Eve that would make everything he'd done completely unravel in front of everyone he cared about. Let me back up for a second and explain how I discovered the lien. Because that part is important. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was at work. I'm a real estate attorney now, by the way, which makes what happened next even more poetic. And I got an alert from the title company I use for my own properties. Someone had pulled a credit report and a title search on my mother's house. My house. I called them immediately and said, "There's been no refinance. I haven't authorized anything." The woman on the phone paused and said, "Ma'am, we have a signed application with your name on it." Dated 6 weeks ago. I drove to their office in 14 minutes flat. What I saw made my hands shake. My father had submitted a loan application for a $400,000 home equity line of credit using my name, my social security number, and a forged driver's license with his address on it. He'd even opened a separate bank account in my name to receive the funds. The signature was close enough to fool someone who wasn't looking carefully, but it wasn't mine. I'd been signing my name for 28 years. I knew every curve, every loop, every hesitation. This was a forgery, and not a very good one. I didn't call my father. I didn't text him. I didn't give him any warning. Instead, I spent the next 3 weeks building a legal fortress around myself. I froze my credit. I filed a police report for identity theft. I hired a private investigator to track exactly where the money went. And then I waited, because Christmas was only 22 days away, and I wanted to give him the gift of consequences in front of an audience. The private investigator's report came back on December 20th. The $400,000 had been spent in less than 4 months. Tiffany's car, $62,000. The trip to Bora Bora, $34,000. A boob job, $11,500. And the rest, mostly cash withdrawals and luxury purchases, handbags, shoes, dinners at restaurants where the average entree costs more than my first car. He'd even paid off $47,000 in credit card debt that he'd accumulated before my mother died. The man was using my house, the house my mother worked 22 years to pay off, as his personal ATM. And Tiffany, she wasn't innocent in this. The investigator found text messages between her and her friends where she bragged about finally getting a sugar daddy who actually delivers. She knew exactly what she was doing. She knew the money wasn't his. She just didn't care. The day before Christmas Eve, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to my attorney. The second was to the Newport Beach Police Department. And the third was to a locksmith. I scheduled everything for December 24th, 7:30 p.m., right in the middle of Christmas Eve dinner. Because if there's one thing my father loves more than money, it's appearances. And I was about to destroy both. Now, I need to pause here and ask you something. Have you ever had to make a decision that you knew would permanently change your relationship with someone you once loved? A decision that wasn't about revenge, but about reclaiming what was taken from you? Drop a comment below and tell me. I want to know. And if you're not subscribed yet, hit that button now. Because what happened at that Christmas dinner is something you don't want to miss. I arrived at the house at 7:15 p.m. The driveway was full. My father's BMW, Tiffany's Mercedes, the one I unknowingly paid for, and 3 other cars belonging to family friends who had no idea what they were about to witness. I parked across the street, took a deep breath, and walked up to the front door carrying a large red gift bag. Inside the bag was everything: the eviction notice, the police report, the private investigator's file, and a framed photo of my mother. My father opened the door with a glass of wine in his hand. "Emily, finally, we were starting to think you weren't coming." He hugged me like nothing had happened, like he hadn't forged my name on $400,000 worth of debt, like he hadn't been planning to take this house from me since before my mother's body was cold. I smiled and said, "I wouldn't miss this for the world." The living room looked like a department store had vomited Christmas everywhere. 2 trees, garlands dripping with fake snow, and a pile of presents so large it blocked half the fireplace. Tiffany was perched on the arm of the couch in a red velvet dress that looked like it had been painted on. She waved at me with those ridiculous nails and said, "Emily, you look so professional." I wanted to say, "And you look like a midlife crisis dressed in Forever 21. But I just smiled and took a seat. Dinner was served at 7:30. Roast beef, mashed potatoes, the whole thing. My father kept making toasts. To family, to new beginnings, to moving forward. Each one felt like a slap in the face. And then, at 7:42 p.m., I stood up. "I have a gift for everyone," I said. "But I think Dad should open his first." I handed him the red bag. He grinned and reached inside. His fingers touched the eviction notice first. He pulled it out, still smiling, until his eyes scanned the top line. "Notice to quit. 30-day eviction. His smile vanished. "What is this?" he asked. "Keep going," I said. "There's more." He pulled out the police report next, then the investigator's file, then the bank statements showing the $400,000 withdrawals, and finally, the framed photo of my mother with a sticky note on the glass that read, "She knew." The room went completely silent. Tiffany's face went pale. One of the family friends whispered, "Mark, what is she talking about?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just looked at my father and said, "You have 30 days to vacate the property. The house is mine. It always has been. And everything you did, the forgery, the fraud, the identity theft, has been turned over to the police. You're not just losing the house, Dad. You're going to lose everything." The silence in that room lasted exactly 7 seconds. I counted. Tiffany was the first to break it. She stood up so fast her wine glass tipped over, splashing red across the white tablecloth. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "Mark, tell her this is a joke." But my father couldn't speak. He was still holding the eviction notice, his hands trembling so badly the paper rattled like dry leaves. One of the family friends, a woman named Diane who'd known my mother for 15 years, stood up slowly and said, "Emily, what's going on?" I looked at her and said, "My father forged my signature on a $400,000 loan against this house. My house. The house my mother left to me. He spent the money on that car in the driveway, on a trip to Bora Bora, and on his girlfriend's plastic surgery." I pointed at Tiffany, and she knew, every step of the way. Tiffany's face went through 3 shades of red before settling on a blotchy crimson. "I didn't know anything," she shrieked. "Mark told me the money was from his investments." I pulled out my phone and read aloud from the investigator's report. December 3rd, text message from Tiffany to contact Jess. Mark finally got the HELOC approved. $400,000. I'm getting the Benz tomorrow, and he said we can go anywhere I want for New Year's. Honestly, his daughter is clueless. She'll never find out. The room erupted. Diane gasped. Her husband muttered, "Jesus Christ," under his breath. The other couple, neighbors my mother had known for a decade, stood up and started gathering their coats. Tiffany was crying now, mascara streaking down her cheeks in black rivers. My father finally looked up from the eviction notice. His face was gray. "Emily," he whispered, "we can talk about this. We're family. You stopped being my family the moment you decided my mother's death was a financial opportunity," I said. "You have 30 days. After that, the locks will be changed, and anything left inside becomes my property. I've already filed the police report. The district attorney's office will be in touch." I turned to leave, but stopped at the doorway. "One more thing," I said. "The bank has frozen the HELOC account. Any attempt to withdraw more money will trigger an automatic fraud alert. And Tiffany's car, it's technically purchased with stolen funds. I'd suggest returning it before it gets repossessed." Tiffany let out a sound I can only describe as a wounded seagull. My father just stood there, the eviction notice crumpled in his fist, surrounded by the wreckage of his own choices. The next 30 days were chaos. My father called me 36 times in the first week alone. I didn't answer. He left voicemails ranging from tearful apologies to screaming rage. "You're destroying my life. After everything I've done for you. Your mother would be ashamed." That last one made me laugh. My mother was the one who warned me. My mother was the one who left me the evidence. If anyone was ashamed, it was him. Tiffany left him on day 12. Apparently, a 59-year-old man facing felony fraud charges wasn't the sugar daddy she'd signed up for. She moved out in the middle of the night, taking most of the expensive Christmas decorations and, ironically, the toaster oven. I found out later she'd already started seeing a 34-year-old real estate agent from Irvine. Good luck to him. On day 28, my father moved out. I watched from across the street as he loaded boxes into a rented U-Haul. No BMW. It had been repossessed 2 weeks earlier. No girlfriend. No friends. Just a 59-year-old man, alone, driving away from the only home he'd known for 2 decades because he tried to steal it from his own daughter. The house was empty when I walked in, It smelled like stale cologne and regret. But underneath that, I could still smell my mother's perfume. Like jasmine and warm vanilla. I opened all the windows. I threw away the gaming chair, the velvet curtains Tiffany had picked out, the cheap art they'd hung over my mother's family photos. And then I sat down in the middle of the empty living room and cried for the first time in months. Not for him. For her. For the 22 years she'd worked to build this home. For the way she trusted him. For the way he'd betrayed that trust while she was still breathing. 3 months later, my father accepted a plea deal. 2 years of probation, full restitution of the $400,000, and a permanent restraining order preventing him from contacting me or coming within 500 feet of the property. He'll be paying that money back for the rest of his life. Every single month, a portion of his pension is garnished and deposited into my account. I donate every cent to a pancreatic cancer research foundation in my mother's name. He knows this. It's written in the restitution agreement. Every payment is a reminder of what he did and who he did it to. I still live in the house. I repainted my mother's office myself. A soft sage green, the color she always wanted but never got around to. I hung her real estate license on the wall. I put fresh flowers on her desk every Sunday. Sometimes I sit in there and talk to her. I tell her about my week, about the cases I'm working on, about the garden I planted in the backyard. And I always end with the same thing. I kept my promise. I didn't let him take what was ours. If you've made it this far, thank you. Thank you for listening to my story. It's not an easy one to tell, but it's mine. And if there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that the people who are supposed to love you the most are sometimes the ones you need to protect yourself from the hardest. Trust your gut, keep your documents, and never, ever let anyone make you feel guilty for defending what's rightfully yours. Before I go, I want to ask you one more thing. If you were in my position, would you have done the same thing? Or would you have walked away and let him keep the house? Drop a broken heart in the comments if you would have fought, or a dove if you would have let it go. I read every response. And if you're new here, hit subscribe. This channel is for anyone who's ever been underestimated, betrayed, or told to just let it go. We don't let it go here. We document, we protect, and we make sure the truth comes out. Next week's story is about a woman whose sister stole her entire inheritance, $780,000, and what happened when she walked into the bank with a lawyer and a voice recorder. You won't want to miss it. Until then, take care of yourselves. And remember, the truth they try to hide always finds a way out.